Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Tori if you're new, and today we are here to talk about the GoodReads Choice Awards picks for 2023. I'm going to focus on 3 sections in particular. At first it was only going to be 2 sections, fantasy and the new romantasy section that they've added, which I'm very excited to see, but I have some thoughts that I'm hoping to share with y'all and just talk through these options. But I need to add the YA fantasy / sci-fi section in here because it goes along with the romantasy section. I have thoughts, so I hope that you're excited. If you are, please be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and let's talk about some books. Grab a coffee, tea, snack. I have my coffee. It's actually just out of reach, so I'm gonna go grab it, and let's have a conversation. Okay, so if I'm looking down, it's because I have my computer right in front of me, and that way we can talk through these options together. I'm gonna pop up a screen recording as well so we can talk through these. Okay, let's go through fantasy picks first. I've read 6 out of the 20 that they've chosen. Honestly, I feel like they did a pretty good job in this section. I just need to get my life together and read more of these picks. So Ink, Blood, Sister, Scribe, I've heard a lot of people raving about. It's one that I do eventually want to get to, but it probably won't be before the end of this year, unfortunately. Same things with Amina Al-Sarafi by Shannon Chakraborty. A book I meant to actually get to this summer, and then time escaped me, as it usually does. I'm so happy to see The Last Tale of the Flower Bride on here because I read that through the audiobook and it honestly feels like a fever dream. I remember absolutely loving it. I also love the audiobook narrator that they got. He's absolutely one of my favorites. His voice is just so hot and sexy. If that man could just narrate every single book, like, I would be so happy. It was done by Steve West. If you've never listened to an audiobook by him, he narrates actually so many like YA fantasy and fantasy books. He's the best. Absolutely recommend him. I'm currently reading Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. I'm so happy to see that on this list because Ninth House took us by storm in 2019, I think it was. So I'm so happy to see Hellbent. I am about 75% of the way through it right now. Love to see that there. Not surprised to see V.E. Schwab. I feel like whenever she comes out with a new book, she's just such a fan favorite that it's going to be on a lot of top people's lists, especially GoodReads Choice Awards. I mentioned Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I actually just finished this book. I'm a little surprised to see it as top fantasy books, but then when I looked at my GoodReads list of like want to reads, books that I've read for publication year of 2023, it makes sense. It's interesting, but I feel like this wasn't a big year for like heavy hitting fantasy book releases. The ones that were really heavy hitters are represented on this list, but there just wasn't like a lot of them to fill 20 spots. I'm surprised to see Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, but I'm also not because I know so many of us did love it. It falls into that cozy fantasy category. I think it's becoming more and more popular, so we love to see it. We love to see a cozy fantasy. Mark Lawrence's The Book That Wouldn't Burn. This is a book that I've had on my Libby shelf and I keep delaying it because I'm prioritizing other books in front of it, but I really want to get to it. I don't know if I'll be able to get to it in December at some point, but I wouldn't be surprised if that book made like a top 10 list or got pretty close to winning. I haven't heard too much about Martha Wells' Witch King. I was really surprised to see Victory City by Salman Rushdie. I feel like that really came out of left field. But again, I think that some of these choices, and let's just talk, I'll do a blanket statement for a couple other choices on here. So as a Greek retelling lover, I was happy to see that a lot of Greek retellings were in the GoodReads Choice Awards, but I was very confused as to why they were all in the fantasy section. Greek retellings are lit fic. It's literary fiction. It is not like a fantasy. Like, yes, there are fantastical elements to it, but Greek mythology is, I don't know, like not fantasy in my brain. So the fact that we have Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes, which I still haven't read, and it's been one of my most anticipated books of the year, but I've heard that it's got some mixed reviews, so it kind of made me prioritize it a little bit less. We have Clytemnestra by Costanza Custodi. I hope that's how you say it. We also have Atalanta, and then The Will of Many. I don't know. All of those, okay, great. I'm happy that they're represented in the GoodReads Choice Awards, but put them in fiction. Like, put them in a different section. Those are not fantasy books. And that's why, like, when I saw Victory City, when I started to see some of those Greek retellings, and I started looking through my Goodreads of book releases for this year for fantasy books, it just wasn't like a really heavy hitting fantasy year, and the fact that they added that romantasy category I think hurt the fantasy section. No surprise to see Tress of the Emerald Sea. I still have that on my TBR cart. I need to get to it. The Will of Many I've literally never heard of. The fact that Alex Harrow has a spot on this list makes me so happy. I was a little surprised to see it in fantasy because, as I understand it, it's quite like a gothic tale, but it does have some fantastical elements to it. But Alex E. Harrow is one of my absolute favorite authors of all time. I have read A Spindle Splintered by her, 10,000 Doors of January by her, Once and Future Witches by her. I love her writing style so much. It's very whimsical, lyrical, gorgeous, gorgeous writing style. So I still haven't read The Starling House. I need to get to it, but I'm so, so happy to see her getting some attention on here. Adrienne Young is another one of my absolute favorite authors of all time. I haven't been keeping up with her newer release fantasy books outside of her series that kind of follows the Narrows. Like, I read Saint, but that was published last year and absolutely loved it. I love a lot more of her like YA fantasy, so I do need to actually just start to read like The Unmaking of June Farrow. She had another one that came out recently that I still haven't read, but love to see Adrienne Young on here. Bookshops and Bone Dust, I don't think we're surprised to see Travis Baldree, another cozy fantasy, represented on this list. I think that's kind of like a duh. I think we would have been surprised if we didn't see it on the list. Already touched on Atalanta. Venko Coven, I haven't heard really anything. I think it's a witchy book, but I have no idea. Not surprised to see Swordcatcher by Cassandra Clare. It would be my first Cassandra Clare book, literally ever. I haven't read any of her other series because I find it very overwhelming and confusing on like where to start and all of these things. But I really want to read Swordcatcher as her first adult fantasy and see what it's like. So I think come January or February of next year, it's on the plans. And then A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon, I'm very happy to see, but I still have on my TBR cart. I actually just got this book, but it's one of my most anticipated releases of the year. I'm planning on getting to this in December. She's a chunky gal, so wish me luck. But usually, I mean, when I read Priory, I absolutely flew through it. I love her writing style, and I'm so happy that we have some dragon book representation on the fantasy section. We have a lot of it in the romantasy, but this is such a heavy hitter. I'm so happy. The only book that I was really surprised not to see in the fantasy section was Fonda Lee's Untethered Sky. That was one that, you know, Fonda Lee is a fan favorite for many, many people because of the Jade Legacy series, trilogy, whatever the name is. So even though that was a novella, it was a fantasy novella that did get a lot of attention. So that was one that I was quite surprised, but it looks like it was filled with a spot from, you know, Greek mythology. Okay, next we're gonna go to Best Young Adult Fantasy and Science Fiction because I have a lot of thoughts here. So with the YA, I have read 4 out of 20. I was a little bit surprised because I read a lot of YA fantasy. Little surprised by some of the choices on here, and I have some thoughts. So no surprise to see Chain of Thorns by Cassandra Clare. I haven't read any of that series, so I haven't read Chain of Thorns because I think that's a finale book. Foxglove by Adeline Grace, I understand it. Blood Debts has a big question mark for me. So I was planning on reading it, didn't end up reading it because all of the feedback that I got from my friends who I trust their taste in reading said that it was not worth it. Like, it really wasn't that great. So in terms of it being like a best pick of the year and like a most popular pick, I'm not following. Like, I really just don't get it. Blood Debts has an average rating of a 3.8 with 2,000 reads, but Cursed Crowns, which is the sequel to Twin Crowns by Catherine Doyle, has a 4.7, has a 4.07 and almost 4,000 reads, and it didn't bump that one like out of its place. I was just big confused with that choice. A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid, I am not surprised. I'm so happy to see it there. I actually thought that that book would have been a better choice for romantasy, kind of, but I'm happy to see it represented in YA. That is totally fine with me. It's one that I have read. Silver in the Bone, I remember seeing this, but I'm not a big fan of Alexandra Bracken. I tried to read Lore, which is a book that you would inherently think I would love. Like, it's a YA fantasy, it has to do with Greek retellings or like Greek mythology, but it actually has a really unique and fun spin on it, making it this like game, like a deadly competition slash game. It came out a couple years ago, and it was really a defining moment for me with Alexandra Bracken, where I was like, I just don't think this is an author for me. Maybe she has grown with her recent publications. These Infinite Threads by Tahira Mafi, not surprised to see that one. I haven't read it yet, unfortunately. Delicious Monsters, gorgeous cover. I feel like the only person I've seen read this is Jan, and I forget how she felt about it, but love to see it. It is a beautiful cover. Divine Rivals, absolutely. This is a book I'm really surprised didn't fall into romantasy though. Like, yes, it is YA, but there's some of these books, and I have thoughts on one in particular that fell onto the YA list and not romantasy. I think that there were, I don't know, like what is the defining thing for romantasy versus YA? And with romantasy, when we get there, all of them are like new adult to adult romantasies, and I find that very confusing. I think Goodreads needs to define, if they're going to start adding subgenres like romantasy, define what romantasy is for them. Like, why wouldn't a YA romantasy fall under romantasy and be classified under YA instead? I don't understand. But Divine Rivals is there. I'm not going to complain about it. Powerless, I'm not surprised to see it. I haven't read it yet. I really want to. House of Marion by JL. I have never heard of this book. Chloe Gong, Foul Heart Huntsman. Not surprised. A Curse for True Love. This is the one that I do have an issue with it being under YA. Yes, it's YA. I totally get that. Like, Stephanie Garber is a YA author, but this was such a heavy hitter in terms of publications in 2023 under the romantasy category. Like, I feel like Stephanie Garber was such a massive contributor into putting romantasy on the map as like a solidified subgenre of fantasy. I don't feel good about Curse for True Love being under YA as opposed to romantasy, because it just feels like it was such a push forward into putting romantasy on the map, if that makes sense. So that's my two thoughts. I think that Curse for True Love should win out of this category, but I think it would have been better suited for romantasy. Threads That Bind, haven't read it, gorgeous cover, really want to. Song of the Silver Flame Like Night. The Scarlet Veil by Shelby Maharan. I have yet to read this. I haven't really heard a lot of people talking about it actually, but I know that because of Serpent and Dove, like everyone was really excited to see her next book, and this one's about vampires, and I never ended up getting to it in October even though I really wanted to. I might try to squeeze that one in before the end of the year. House of Roots and Ruin. I'm glad to see Erin A. Craig getting a little bit more recognition. I know that House of Salt and Sorrow was quite a mixed bag for a lot of people. I thought it was pretty solid. It kind of falls into an interesting mix between like horror and YA fantasy. But I know that my friend Katie from Katie's Book Nook read House of Roots and Ruin and really enjoyed it. Bring Me Your Midnight by Rachel Griffin, one that I meant to get to in October and I didn't. Don't be mad at me. Stolen Air by Holly Black. I'm not surprised. I don't think it's like the best written book, but I know that Holly Black is such a fan favorite that when she puts out the next installment of this series, I'm sure it's also going to be on the GoodReads Choice Awards. What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez. This is getting a lot of attention kind of right now. I feel like it was on a lot of people's TBRs for October and November. And Spice Road, which I've been meaning to get to because I love like desert setting type fantasies. But my other two thoughts in this category, Flower Heart by Catherine Bakewell didn't make the YA fantasy section. I feel like if I could swap two books, I would put in Flower Heart by Catherine Bakewell and into this category to fill a Curse for True Love spot and move a Curse for True Love into romantasy. And then Mysteries of Thorn Manor didn't make it on this list. I was so surprised because Margaret Rogerson is such another author that just has like such a cult following. She's such a fan favorite for so many people, and I know that it was a novella, but still, I feel like it deserved a spot over maybe like a Blood Debts or something like that. Like, just saying, I don't know. The grand finale here. Best romantasy. There's books on here that I still need to read, and I'm like kicking myself because I still haven't gotten to them yet. Mainly the Hurricane Wars. I was supposed to read this last week and I didn't get to it, but I will be reading it very soon in November. And then Ashes and the Starker's King, I'm reading this next week, and I'm so happy to see it on this list, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk through some of these choices. So the Jasad Heir, I'm not surprised to see this because I know it was so popular, but a lot of people, and I am planning on reading it, a lot of people told me that it was much more like political fantasy than it was fantasy romance, and I don't know the truth behind it. I obviously haven't experienced it myself. I know that it was so popular, so the fact that it made romantasy, okay, I won't complain. We have our first JLA book. That's all I'm gonna say. I haven't read anything by JLA, by the way, which is crazy because I love romantasy so much. And I have yet to even touch one of her books. But I'm a little bit disappointed that she has 3 books on romantasy, and there could have been a lot of other choices. We'll get to it in a second. A Game of Gods by Scarlett St. Clair. This was a big curveball for me because I love Scarlett St. Clair. Love her so much. I love her Touch of Darkness series. Her Game of series isn't my favorite because A Touch of Darkness follows Persephone in a Hades and Persephone retelling. The Game of series is the same books written in Hades POV. I don't like it. I think the last book is A Touch of Chaos that's coming out very soon, but Scarlett St. Clair was basically supposed to publish A Touch of Chaos in like 2022, and it got pushed back to 2024. I think it's coming out sometime next year because my thoughts, her publisher was like, nah, do a whole series in Hades POV. So she basically wrote the first 3 books that we got from Persephone's POV. Same story, nothing else happens in terms of plot, but it's told in Hades POV. I so much would have rathered if the series was just told dual POV from the very beginning. So A Game of Gods is the like finale book in the Hades POV section, and then she's going to be publishing the last book in the Persephone POV section, whatever it is, like next year. But Scarlett St. Clair came out with Mountains Made of Glass this year, and Mountains Made of Glass is a spicy adult romantasy that was stunning. I gave it 5 stars. I literally loved it so much. I was so happy to see that she published something other than just like these Hades POVs that I'm kind of over at this point. And I'm so surprised that that book didn't make this list over A Game of Gods, because I feel like that series of hers, that Hades POV, isn't as popular as some of her other books. So that was also another curveball for me, and I digress. Rant over at this point. The Hanging City by Charlie N. Holmberg. When I looked up this book, because I haven't really heard anyone talking about it, it has such high ratings and so many people have read it, and I was like, where have I been? So I am adding that to my list. I'm trying to squeeze in so many books into December. Throne of the Fallen by Carrie Maniscalco. Not surprised. Carrie Maniscalco is another one that if she publishes books, she has a fandom that's going to read them. I have yet to get to it, but I am excited. We have our second JLA book. That's all I'm going to say about that. Zodiac Academy. I'm not surprised to see it. I haven't started that series yet because it's such a commitment. Then we have The Hurricane Wars. Now, one that I really want to read, like I mentioned, haven't touched it yet, but I plan to. I've heard very mixed reviews on this, so I was quite surprised to see it on the GoodReads Choice Awards pick for romantasy. So we'll see what happens. I can't wait to get to it and experience it myself. I will be reading it this month. A Court This Cruel and Lovely. Haven't read it, haven't really heard too many people talking about it, but I looked it up, has high ratings, has a lot of readers, so makes sense. Hannah Witten, Foxglove King, not surprised. Bewitched by Laura Thalassa, I have read, and I did really like it. I gave it 4 stars. I guess I was just surprised because I feel like there's books on this romantasy list that were like such a softer pick than some of the other books I'm going to talk about when we get to the end. Slaying the Vampire Conqueror by Carissa Broadbent. I love to see it. I loved this book so much. I gave it 5 stars. And the fact that Carissa Broadbent has 2 books on this list, love her. Love this for her. Clearly you can see a bias between I'm fine with Carissa Broadbent having 2 books on this list, but JLA having 3, I'm like, what is happening? But I would have been fine with either or. I feel like Slaying the Vampire Conqueror, because it's a standalone, may have been a better choice. It's always questionable, right, about like whether sequels should be allowed on these lists, but I think they should. Moving on. 3rd book from JLA, whatever. Fourth Wing by Veruca Yaros. There's literally no surprises there. The biggest surprise for me is that Iron Flame wasn't on this list. Did it like just not make the cutoff? Like, I don't understand, because everyone's losing their stinking mind about this book, and I have yet to read it, but like, you're gonna have Fourth Wing and 3 books from JLA and 2 books from Carissa Broadbent, but you're not gonna give Veruca Yaros her moment to shine. Like, this is one of the biggest publications in romantasy of the year. It had to have like just not made the cutoff. That would be my presumption. The Coven by Harper L. Woods. This sounds like a really spicy good time. I have to read it and I haven't yet, but not surprised to see Harper L. Woods on there. I did read her What Lies Beyond the Veil and it wasn't my favorite, but I am curious about The Coven. Assistant to the Villain. This one's taking the world by storm. I guess I didn't realize it was romantasy. Like, I was a little bit surprised to see it in this category, but makes sense. A Queen of Thieves and Chaos by K.A. Tucker. Haven't heard of it. Ashes, which we've talked about. Rule of the Aurora King. I have seen this one. And then A Dawn of Onyx, which I'm absolutely getting to by the end of this year. I'm so happy to see it on this list because Kate Golden deserves this. I think this was, and I might be wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong, I think this was at first indie published, and then she did get picked up by a traditional publisher, and I believe that this published book that I have, yeah, it was picked up by Berkeley, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House, so love that for her. Okay, let's talk through books that didn't make this list over some of the ones that were chosen instead. That's why I want Goodreads to give like a definition of romantasy, because it's a subgenre of fantasy. I think it needs some clarification in order for us to understand like why certain books were chosen for this and not others. Mainly Curse for True Love. I'm still stunned, shocked. I have no words that it didn't make romantasy. I'm very surprised that Two Twisted Crowns didn't make this list. I feel like One Dark Window did get a lot of hype, and then I feel like, in my opinion, I thought that Two Twisted Crowns, the publication for that, was fairly anticipated by the romantasy girlies. I feel like a lot of people have read it. Let's look up the stats for Two Twisted Crowns. I'm very curious. It has almost 19,000 ratings, and it has a 4.55 rating, and Two Twisted Crowns wasn't on romantasy. That blows my mind. Did JLA need 3 spots? We couldn't have given one of them to Rachel Gillig? I don't understand. I am very upset that Kimberly Lemming didn't get a spot on this list. And I need a moment of silence for that, because Kimberly Lemming's That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon was one of the best romantasies that I've read this year. It was spicy, it was funny, it had adventure, I gave it 5 stars. Literally loved it so much. The fact that it didn't make this list really aggravates me, especially because in this romantasy category, there is not a lot of diverse representation amongst authors, and Kimberly Lemming deserved a spot on this list. And I will riot and rage about that for the rest of this year. And then my last one, Blood and Steel. This book is getting a lot of attention. I feel like it's becoming a lot more popular. It has a 4.3 rating with 6,000 plus reads, but Assistant to the Villain made it with less than a 4.0 rating because 36,000 people read it. And then again, like, I read Bewitched and I loved Bewitched, but Bewitched has a 3.98 rating and 6,000 reads. This one has a higher rating. So it's like, I just get a little frustrated with the GoodReads Choice Awards, because I completely understand. It is a popularity contest. It is, what is the book community reading, loving? The way that they choose some of these books, I'm like, why? Who votes for like the 20 that are up there in the beginning? Like, I think that this deserved a spot. I think that this deserved a spot. I think that Kimberly Lemming deserved a spot. So I'm a little upsetty spaghetti about the romantasy choices. All of that to say, I do have quite a few books that I'm adding to my end of the year TBR that I want to read that are on these lists. I'm really excited to vote. I haven't voted for any of these quite yet. A couple that I'm really super excited to get to, The Jasad Heir, The Hanging City, The Coven, I think will be a really, really fun time. And then in the fantasy section, I mean, like I mentioned, Tress of the Emerald Sea. I am excited to read Bookshops and Bone Dust as well. Amina al-Sarafi, absolutely. I kind of want to reread The Last Tale of the Flower Bride because that book is kind of a fever dream to me, but I remember like the writing style was so good, and if I can have an excuse to listen to Steve West one more time, absolutely. I need to get to The Starling House, The Book That Wouldn't Burn, and A Day of Fallen Night. So I'm very excited for these books. Like I mentioned, these are all just my opinions. Please let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. If you disagree with some of the things that I said, totally fine. Let me know why. Thank you so much for watching. I will catch you in the comments, and I'll see you in my next one, friends. Bye!